Hello there, Riderflex Nation. Steve Urban here with more career advice and job interviewing tips for you. And as a quick reminder, if you enjoy our podcast, please remember to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes. And on today's podcast, we have Brenton Hutson, the Division Director for Volunteers of America in Colorado. Brenton, how you doing?
Doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I really appreciate you being on the call. Thank you so much. Can you, for the listeners, why don't you just tell them a little about yourself first? Let's start there, and then we can go into the VOA.
Sure thing. Yeah, like you mentioned, I'm the Division Director for Volunteers of America here in Colorado. I oversee a lot of our homeless services programming around the state, and I work with our national office on developing strategies for responding to various needs that we see in the communities in which we work. My professional career actually began at the age of, I'm going to back it up even further. My semi-professional career began actually in Colorado working at Elitch's at the age of 14.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of where I got a good dose of work ethic and just kind of got engaged with the value that work added to my life as far as giving me a purpose and something to strive for. And then I joined the Marine Corps at the age of 17.
Thank you so much for your service, by the way.
Sure thing.
Yep.
Yeah. And was in the Marine Corps in some form or another for about 6 years. And when I got out, I ended up switching into public health and leadership development, working for an international development organization known as ECTA. And with that organization, I worked here in the States, but also in India and Bhutan for extensive periods of time. And then after a while, I kind of decided that I wanted to shift my professional focus back to the United States, a community and communities in which I grew up in, knowing that it seemed to me that in my experience at that point in my life, leaders had the ability to make a far greater impact on communities in which they came from than in communities in which they were stepping into from the outside. And so that's how I came to be with Volunteers of America back in 2012.
I see. Fantastic career, by the way, and great resume, great profile. I looked over your history and was really impressed. And, thanks. I said, thanks for your service. Actually, you've been serving in some way pretty much your whole life, from what I can tell. So really outstanding career so far. Congratulations on everything you've done.
Thank you.
For the listeners that don't know anything about VOA, let's assume there's some listeners on here that never heard of the organization. Can you give kind of just an overview of the VOA and the division you're working in, and just kind of go deeper there a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love talking about VOA. In my opinion, it's not just because I work here, but VOA, Volunteers of America, is the best organization out there. That's great. I say that for a couple of reasons. One, I love its history. Volunteers of America is over 120 years old. We actually, our founders were a part of the founding family of the Salvation Army and split off from the Salvation Army. Back in the day, it was a big family issue.
I see.
But they split off because they wanted their work to focus again on that community in which they were living at the time, which was the United States. And at that time, the Salvation Army was based in the United Kingdom. So it was VOA was kind of created with this rebellious, community-focused spirit in mind. I love it.
I see.
Now, VOA's mission is to meet the needs of our communities most vulnerable, which is so almost ambiguous and wide. And I think that relative ambiguity is what actually allowed our organization to work so effectively in communities around the country, because we don't say we're going to do healthcare. We don't say we're going to do case management. We don't say we're going to do Meals on Wheels. We say we're going to look at every community that we're in, and we're going to do our best to meet the needs as they present. Those needs shift over time until our organization also evolves over time. So as a mission-focused guy, somebody who came up professionally in the Marine Corps, who loves a good mission, Volunteers of America to me is very much exactly that. It's a mission-focused organization. My division specifically, the Division of Veterans and Supportive Services, focuses on researching, developing, implementing, improving upon strategies to end homelessness and to meet critical behavioral health care needs for populations that present with multiple barriers to self-sufficiency and success.
Gotcha.
And so that's what we do. We work with veterans. We work with persons experiencing homelessness, persons with chronic and debilitating behavioral health issues, and persons exiting incarceration with significant justice involvement.
You can hear the passion in your voice, by the way. It's super clear that you're passionate about the organization. It must be a wonderful thing to not only work a job professionally to provide for your own family, of course, but to also make a difference in people's lives, right? I mean, that's got to just be very rewarding. And you can feel it and hear it on your voice. Can I ask for people that might want to donate or support or whatever, is it as easy as just going to the website, or how would you direct people that might want to be involved?
Mm-hmm. So another thing that Volunteers of America is really passionate about, and one of our core organizational values, is service. Obviously, we have volunteers in the name. And absolutely. And so what we hope to do is to create a culture of service. And through that, we provide opportunities for folks, whether they're working in this field in human services or whether they're working in a different area but still want to find a way to give back to their community. We find and connect people with meaningful opportunities to do so. So if you do go to our website, which is voacolorado.org, there are opportunities to sign up for volunteer service activities on that website, short-term, long-term, everything in between. Obviously, there are opportunities to donate. We're also not known as an organization that would shy away from $1. So if people want to donate, absolutely, that would be very helpful.
Gotcha.
But we really look at our place in the community as being a facilitator for people to engage, get to know their neighbors from all backgrounds and all walks of life, and to facilitate those conversations and those interactions that help us to build a stronger society.
It's great. Riderflex, when we first started our podcast, our mission was to, give back in some way. We wanted to help in some way, kind of a service like you mentioned. And I think, our service was trying to provide people input on how they could prepare for the job interview and things, because as we interview people every day as a recruiting firm, we always see all the mistakes and the things people could do better. So we started the podcast in the spirit of, service and giving back, and, to give people tips, free tips they could listen to online. And then our podcast host, Anchor FM, sent us a note and said, hey, you can put a donations button on your podcast and you can actually make money on your podcast. And I thought, well, okay, I guess that's cool. That wasn't really our intention, but if we can make money on that, that's great. And then we immediately started looking for somebody to partner with, like VOA, to be able to contribute, so that we could, if we do get proceeds, that we can contribute to an organization and continue that spirit of giving back. So we're just super proud to be partnered with you guys, and happy to mention you on our podcast and so forth. I couldn't think of a better organization. And several people on the team have family members that were veterans, and so that was the other big tie-in for us. Scott's, my partner Scott, his dad was a Vietnam vet, and several other people have veterans. And so that's why it's special to us, and we're just super proud to be partnered with you guys. Can I ask, on this podcast, we do we do two different things. We give, job interviewing advice, and we also give general career advice. But on the job interviewing side, if somebody wanted to work for the VOA and get a job there, what are some pieces of advice you would give them? How should they go about that? And what do you, and then on top of that, what do you look for in an interview when people are interviewing with their organization? Kind of a two-part question there.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple of things, I guess. It's important for people to know that we are absolutely a value-driven organization. And by that, I mean, we have our organizational values. We have these characteristics of a team player that we look for in everybody that we hire. They're kind of based upon the consultancy work of the Table Group, which some folks who are familiar with, interviewing and team dynamics would be familiar with. But we want people to be humble. We want them to be hungry. We want them to be smart. We want them to be honest. We want them to demonstrate the values of accountability, integrity, respect, and service. And we don't want them to talk about these things in superfluous terms. We want them to come prepared to discuss times in their life when they've exemplified those values and when they failed to live up with them. Mm-hmm. Because as we all know, not everybody's perfect. But what is more important than being perfect is being able to learn and demonstrating a passion for personal, professional self-improvement, and that drive to always seek out the better version of ourselves, even if we can never really get there. So that's the first thing I would tell somebody is, as you're going through your life, as you're thinking about getting into this field, it's important to reflect upon what you're experiencing at any given point in time, and to put that away in your piggy bank so that when the time comes, when you can tell that story, when you can relate it to an interviewer or a team member, or down the road somebody you're supervising, that you haven't just forgotten about it, that you haven't just set it aside, that you can reference it and use it as a tool to generate success moving forward. The other thing I would say is I like folks who kind of step outside of their comfort zone. So I think the thing that I've grown accustomed to is you spend the first 15 minutes of an interview just trying to break down people's barriers.
Right. So true. So true.
And so I love when people come prepared to be an open book with me, because again, nobody in human services, especially when we are dealing with people going through the worst times in their lives, nobody expects somebody to walk through the door and be the perfect picture of confidence and everything that we're looking for. What we do expect, what we want, is the ability to get a real feel for who you are. And it is just, as you know, I'm sure, Steve, it is just so obvious when somebody isn't presenting that true picture.
Yep, it sure is. It sure is. Is there a favorite question that you love to ask during the interview, one or two?
I have a few. I do like to ask a lot of behavioral questions. So again, specific examples of times in which people have or have not lived up to certain values, or lessons they've learned, so on and so forth. So that's kind of a larger concept. I do occasionally like to get into people's mindset as it relates to their place in society. So it's a long question, so I'm not going to get too far into the specifics of it. But years ago, I read an article, I believe in the Harvard Business Review, talked about an interviewer who had gotten into the habit of reviewing what's known as a tragedy of the commons with potential applicants. And he kind of reframed the question in such a way that, in essence, what it was trying to get at was, are you willing to make a sacrifice for the betterment of your team? Like, it would require something of you. You would not be as successful right now, but your team would be more successful. And for anybody that's familiar with the tragedy of the commons, which had to do with the Irish potato famine and society's role leading into that, that was very much the concept coming out of it, is the sacrifice of a few could have certainly led to the betterment of many, but there were choices that were made that didn't allow for that. And so I kind of do a play on that from time to time to see how people react for a few reasons. One, because it's a long, hard question to answer, and I like to see people even comfortable asking for clarification if they need it. And two, because I do want to know. I want to know that we're hiring a team player that's willing to look to the team more than they are to look towards themselves.
That's really great stuff. I appreciate you sharing that. Really, really good. Let me ask you this, looking at your own career, and seeing the advancement you've had, can you give, let's go towards some career advice here. What was it like, or I guess what were the biggest learning pieces for you when you stepped into that division director position back in 2015, that a bigger role than you had before, moving into an executive position, so to speak, right? What are the biggest learning pieces for you when that happened, and anything you might want to share for all the listeners who, all those people that are at an associate or a manager level and they're trying really hard to move to director or VP. Anything you want to give advice on there for the folks listening?
Oh, so many things. Yeah. I think
that's almost a separate podcast, right? Just for that.
Yeah, really. No, I think, and I've done this too, but I think people kind of make the assumption that as they're promoted, that's going to make them more passionate, more energetic about their work, right? Or that because they're really good at being a manager, or really good at being a supervisor, that as they stepped into a director executive role, that they're going to just naturally be really good at that. And I think what a lot of people, myself included, have failed to realize is that it's a different role. Being a director is much different than being a manager. And it's really, the difference is really in the title, right? A director, you're directing, but your hands aren't in it as much. And I think that's true. Every step up you take, you're getting further and further and further away of the day-to-day field operations that maybe gave you so much life at one point, so much passion and energy. And so you have to begin to find energy and passion and contentment in other things. And that doesn't happen overnight or naturally. The other thing I've struggled with, I've seen a lot of people struggle with, is just this concept that, again, every step you take up, you have more responsibility, more people underneath you. It also means that you have to trust people that are reporting to you more, and make sure, extra sure, that the people that are reporting to you complement your strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
That they are worthy of that trust, because you absolutely, when you aren't down in the mix as much, you absolutely have to be able to trust them to carry out your directions so that you don't. When you go from managing a 10-person team to directing a 90-person division, you can't manage 90 people.
Right.
So you have to be able to trust people to do that for you. Yeah.
You can just tell by listening to you, that you've been in a leadership role for a long time already, and you're still a young guy, but you've been in a leadership role super early, right? From like you said, like 17 years old, and you can tell just by talking to you. Really good advice. Let me ask you, sticking on the career advice for our listeners, a couple more questions here. What's your a two-part question? What's your Super Bowl moment so far professionally? The kind of the biggest achievement so far you think you've had, and then let's roll that right into what's the biggest mistake you've made so far that you learned from?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, my Super Bowl moment may have been a mistake and was a bit of a failure, but it was so representative to me of something I think is really important in leadership, which is being willing to fail boldly, if that's what it takes to keep moving forward. So when I was at the last organization I worked for, which actually another Marine and myself had co-founded after we got off of active duty, we were working to stand up this really innovative project in Bhutan, right? Which is this country a lot of people don't even know exists. It's a tiny, tiny country just south of China and north of India. What we're looking to do was to engage in standing up a social enterprise where we would provide ultralight, which are just basically gliders with lawnmower engines attached to them, flights out of tourist centers in Bhutan to these rural villages that had unmet healthcare needs. And so we would fly out there for the purposes of social tourism and social enterprise, but then also have each of our pilots equipped with basic medical skill sets and the ability to evacuate people back to city centers if needed. Now, we worked on this project for years, and it was alongside a lot of other big, hard projects and work that we were doing. So it took a lot out of all of us. We got to the point where we'd set up a meeting to meet with the Queen of Bhutan. We ended up meeting with the tourism ministry. We'd done, 2, 3, multiple trips back and forth setting this thing up. And it looked like it was a green. It looked like it was a go. We poured everything into it. And at the last gasp, we found out that it was a great idea. And what we heard through the grapevine was that the tourism ministry of Bhutan thought it was such a great idea, they wanted to do it themselves and didn't want us to do it. And it was a kick in the gut. It was something that we poured our hearts into. And we were upset. It was an ego kick. It was operationally, it was tough to deal with. But the energy that we generated through all of that had led us to a lot of realizations about ourselves, about our organization, about our team dynamic, that ultimately led us in a different, much healthier, much more sustainable direction for the organization. So to me, that was a Super Bowl moment. We went to the Super Bowl and we lost. So we're going back into the next season with a much stronger team as a result.
That those learning experiences, first of all, they improve you as a professional overall, and it ends up those kind of situations end up steering you in different directions, right? They shape the path of your life and of your job and the things you do. So it all works out. Everything happens for a reason, as my partner always says, right? And that one probably happened for a reason, right? There's reasons it happened, but a great learning experience.
Absolutely.
So when you look back now, is there, and you, by the way, you give advice to people all day, every day, right? So you're constantly mentoring people in your role. When you're talking to an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old, and you're giving them advice and you're thinking to yourself, boy, if I could go back to 17 or 18, I would do something different. So let's ask the question that way. What advice would you give your, let's call it 17-year-old self? And I'm going to use 17 because that's when you joined the service. What advice would you give your 17-year-old self?
Yeah. And I think one thing really stands out. I was really fortunate when I came into the Marine Corps. I had a fantastic squad leader, humble guy, hungry guy, smart, honest, everything I could ever hope to be. And one of the first concepts we learned in the Marine Corps was this notion of something called the fatal funnel. Now, fatal funnel in the context of a military environment is this point in which you come upon, you're driving a convoy down the road and you see a log or, a big tree or some cars stacked in the middle. It basically represents a barricade. And if you stop in front of that obstacle, that's the fatal funnel. That's where you're most likely to get hit. That's where you're most likely to sustain casualties. The only appropriate response to coming up against a barrier like that is to keep moving forward, to keep moving, right?
Okay.
And so I've kind of taken that concept that stuck with me throughout my entire professional career because I've had health crises, I've had family crises, just like everybody will at some point in their life, while they're also trying to balance work and everything else they hope to achieve. The one thing that's kept me going is this concept: no matter what is going on in your life, you get up and you keep moving through that fatal funnel. You don't stop. And provided you don't stop, you eventually you're going to move past it. It might hurt, but you're going to move past it. If you stop, you might not, right?
You're absolutely right. I was yesterday. I was coming back from a meeting and talking to my partner here at Riderflex, and we were kind of patting each other on the back for a very successful day. But we were also reflecting back 2 days ago when we had some hurdles and some opportunities and some fires to put out. And we said that to each other. It's all about you just keep moving forward, keep pushing forward, right? When there's opportunities, because to your point, there always will be, right? There's always going to be curveballs and opportunities, and you just have to keep pushing forward. It's so critical. So last question, and by the way, you're super motivational, right? Just by listening to you talk, I'm getting pumped up, just so you know. And so I could chat with you for another hour, but let me wrap it up for this one with one last question. This is one of my favorite questions. A mentor of mine challenged me with this a while back, and I usually ask this question towards the end of the podcast. He said to me one day, Steve, what's your core purpose? And I tried to give him, I did the quick answer, right? Oh, well, I want to take care of my family. I want to make the world a better place. Kind of the standard answer that most people would probably give if they were caught off guard. And he said, yeah, that's cool and all. That's the standard answer. But really, let's go deeper. What's your real core purpose when you wake up every day? And I got to tell you, Brenton, I couldn't answer it. And at the time, I was almost 50 years old. And that really bothered me for a few weeks. I just kept thinking, man, what is my core purpose? And I finally pushed it towards Riderflex and what we do for a living. And I believe my core purpose is to help people find professional happiness. And we do that through placing people, in the right jobs. But anyway, I love to ask the question. So I was kind of stalling there to let you think about it. What's your core purpose now professionally when you wake up every day?
Yeah, well, I mentioned it earlier, Steve. I love a mission, right? And I think our society is really, they are hungry for a mission. Our society is hungry for a mission. And so every day I wake up, I try to find a mission I can pursue and get excited about. And I try and get my team excited about it too. Mm-hmm. So that tireless pursuit of a mission that leaves a positive impact on our society, I would say is my core purpose, and equally as important is getting my team excited about the missions that they're engaged in as well.
That's great. Well, Brenton, I've really appreciated you being on the call today. Thank you so much. Appreciate your service, not only in the military, but what you're doing now at the VOA, something really to be proud of. Pleasure talking with you, sir. Thanks for calling in, and hope to have you on the show again sometime soon.
Thank you, Steve. We appreciate your support out of Riderflex. Thanks for having me on.
You bet, Brenton. Take care. We truly hope you find our material helpful and entertaining. And while our podcast can be heard across most platforms, including iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, and SoundCloud, you can become a supporter of this podcast by visiting our show on the platform Anchor FM. That's anchor.fm/Riderflex. You can also send us your questions or suggested topics for future episodes to the email address podcast@riderflex.com, or drop us a voicemail at 888-964-5876, extension 710. Visit riderflex.com to learn more about us. Thanks so much for listening, folks, and have a great day.